Another day, my friends. It is Sunday. This is our first weekend conversation for the Facebook Live around the conference. So remember, our goal with these sessions is to get you to have a conversation. The idea is to share ideas. So these sessions are sort of spinning off of the original sessions of the virtual conference. So Erik and I have had a conversation already about branding for lawyers. It's over in the virtual conference. If you haven't signed up, go to lawyerforward.com/virtual and you can sign up there. Now what we want to do is just like the small group sessions that we did at the live event, we want to just get together and bounce ideas around. So this issue of branding for lawyers, without me offending a bunch of people, I'm going to leave that to Erik, is
I'm good at it.
Is like a pet peeve of mine. This is a thing that lawyers are. We tend to be very stream of consciousness for things that we don't really care that much about. And I'm saying we on purpose because I do the same thing. And so we're not very deliberate about these kinds of things. But the user, the person who sees us, the prospective client, they think about this stuff. They see inconsistencies, and so this is a bit of a thing that seems esoteric, but it's really important. So I hope what you guys will do is in the comments below, you'll ask questions, you'll give ideas, tell us what you guys are doing to stand out, to make sure that people are talking about you when you're not around. So Barry Seidel is here. Hey, brother. So Erik, I wanted to talk to you a bit about, as we wait for some questions. So I've heard the cliche that branding is what people say about you when you're not there, right? It's the stuff that you have less control over, that you're not totally guiding that conversation because you're not part of it, but you can seed that conversation. And so I wanted to talk to you about this moment, this particular moment that we're in. Should we even be thinking about this? How to get people to talk about us when they got such big things going on in their own lives?
Well, absolutely, right? People are still going to need lawyers for all types of things, and you still have competition. Any lawyer in any field still has competitors or colleagues that are out there who already have brands or who are building brands. So if they're not thinking about a brand, they're falling behind on the others. I like how you put it about how it's what people are saying about you when you're not there. You know, you could think of if somebody was at a conference and you left the room and they said, "Who was that guy? What is he? What does he do? What is he all about?" Maybe, what are 5 words that somebody would use to describe you and your practice and your mantra, perhaps, is a good way to think about your brand. In these particular times, there are obvious challenges. And so I personally, my field is trademark law, working primarily with small businesses, protecting their brands. I recognize that mom and pop businesses right now are, overwhelmed, worrying about employees and payroll and PPP and what's the opening deadlines and all these other things. And even though trademark protection is always important, it's obviously well down on their list right now. And so I'm balancing I'm still creating a lot of content, and some of it I'm saving for the future if it's about brand protection in general. And some of it I'm creating to be about brands in a crisis. And it's not really about hire a lawyer, register your trademark. It's really more like, I'm here for you. I want to help clients and other businesses get through this. Here's what I'm seeing, telling stories, sharing just tips in general. And I've gotten a lot of great feedback about that content.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about content and social capital. But before I do, I would point out Shelley Woodward said that her dog doesn't usually watch videos, but he was interested in the discussion on authenticity. Shelley and all watchers, as you saw last night with my dog Wendy sitting on my son's bed, pets are always welcome in these discussions. So one thread that seems to be coming out with a lot of the conversations around this is like, this is a weird time to cash in on social, this is a really weird time to go pretend that you have connections that you haven't actually built, I guess is the way I would put it. And so, Jordan Furlong's been talking about this a lot. If a lawyer suddenly calls somebody, is like, "Hey, what work do you have for me right now?" Just a really weird time to do that. And yet, if you've done a bunch of branding work beforehand, if you've done a bunch of connecting work and social capital work beforehand, this is the time that stuff exists for, right? Like it's these moments. So, I mean, I keep giving the example of this conference. It was, I had a couple of projects stall, and I was like, what do I do with my time? I need to generate some revenue. I need to do some work. And so I just went out to people I already had connections with and said, hey, do you guys want to do a thing? And it has generated some new connections, but frankly, all the money from it has come from people that are businesses, sponsors that I already had connections with. I already did that work. So I guess part of what's the cliche? The best day to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best day is today. This is one of those things that I think we're realizing that if we didn't do the brand work and we didn't do the connection work, we sort of feel screwed right now. So maybe this is a time to really say, I should be doing this stuff rather than getting down in the dumps about it.
And getting really down to the core, it's what value are you providing to people? If you're not sure what the value is that you're providing to people and why your value is worth it for them, you need to stop everything and reevaluate that. And I'm confident that what I do and have done provides tremendous value, and it'll provide tremendous value regardless of the times, right? And so then I'm confident having a conversation with a person or making a proposal for a person because I know that they're getting a value out of that. Now, another thing that you said that I wanted to pick up on was just sort of cashing in on that capital and paying attention to what's happening to the world around you and to your existing clients. First of all, existing clients are always the best source of future work. For me, for many of us, it depends a little bit on what field you're in. Hopefully, if you represent people in motorcycle accidents,
you don't have a lot of
repeat business. Right. But for my field, I get a lot of repeats. I get so much business, and I tell this to other trademark attorneys too, just by watching my clients' newsletters, social media, and other things that, hey, I noticed you're doing this. Several clients have noted, hey, I noticed you're now shifting to making masks or doing this new thing to help in the crisis.
There might be you're not talking about
issues that we should talk about.
Right. So you mean not you creating content, but you paying attention to their content. So are you, when you're engaging with their conversations that they're having out loud or whatever their Google alerts, if you're paying attention to news stories or whatever, when you reach out to them, are you saying, here's some lawyer advice related to this thing? Or are you saying, hey, I really love that piece that you just did? Like, is it about engagement or is it about, let me go see if I can give you some advice?
It's mostly about building the connection. Hey, I really love what you're doing. I want to share that in my newsletter if you're okay with it. And, brag that my clients are doing great things, but also because there are IP needs that they do create. I'm not afraid to say, when you have a moment, we should also talk about how you're going to protect this because it is important. You can maybe hear my dog now going nuts in the background. She really likes this idea too.
You have a little dog, don't you?
A little dog, a little vicious dog. Yeah.
A tiny little ragey dog. I don't know what it is about dogs and their Napoleon complexes. So Barry Seidel posted that it seems to me that putting out genuine, informative videos is a can't miss and establishes you as you. So I was thinking about Florida and wrestling. So the governor of Florida recently, this was all over the news. Each governor is defining what essential businesses are in the different states, and he announced, this guy is special. But he announced the other day that the WWE is an essential business. And the reason is that people are hard up for content right now. Everybody's done watching the stupid Tiger show, which I have not seen, watching the stupid Tiger show that everybody's talking about. Now what do I do with my time? Clearly, I need fake wrestling, and it's fake, and I'll hear nothing else on that subject. But I wonder if I'm out there creating content, if I want to go speak to the world, is now the time to say, hey, I did a video on the top 10 issues facing people who were asking questions about trademarks? Or is it, hey, let me introduce you to my dog who's yapping. And you know what I mean? Is it more entertainment? Is it more personal? How would you advise people go build brand right now?
I think it's okay to do the here's 10 great tips about trademarks. First of all, because it's evergreen content. When you put the video up there, people are going to be searching and watching it in 6 months. In fact, it's more likely that they find it in 6 months than that they find it today. Probably, at least that's what I've found. Yeah. But I think it's also valuable and important to mix in content that, is specific to the moment. Talking about the challenges or the crisis or what's different about today. And of course, there's lots of newsworthy subjects in almost every area of law, rules being changed or suspended or things on hold. So there's plenty to talk about, related to that at a minimum, and create content about that. So I'm doing a hybrid.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, because I feel like we're and I want to talk more about content, actually. What is the relationship between content and brand for you? Because your session was about brand. It was about this idea of what people say about you when you're not around. And I mean, we even talked about, logos and colors and, filing trademarks and protecting these brand. Like, your session was about that kind of branding. But you made the point that branding is not just logos and colors. What's the relationship between saying things out loud, working out loud, and brand?
So I think the two key overlaps that I would see there in branding and content are, number one is your brand is a reflection of who you are and your expertise, experience, persona, charisma, whatever, all of those things. That gets reflected in content.
Right.
It's not a requirement that you have content. You can have a brand without content, but it gets reflected in the content.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was a talk I was listening to on the Hustle and Flow podcast. They were, Hustle and Flow Chart is what it's called, podcast.
A playful trademark.
Indeed. And assuming they have a trademark on it. And, the guy who was talking, I think he's in one of these funnel companies, one of these technology companies that creates sales funnels. And he made the point, he's like, 10, 15 years ago, we had this fiction of the buyer's journey. The idea that I could map out a person's going to do this and then this and then this, and I can control that whole path so they get to the point that they buy things from me. And now we're in this situation where people just comment stuff from all different angles. Like what leads somebody to buy something, to hire a lawyer, is such a nebulous, sort of unpredictable, uncontrollable web of activities that we can't put in a line anymore. And so what he points out is you want to cultivate an atmosphere, right? And so where the activity that you want is more likely. And I think of this branding thing as, again, if I'm trying to seed the conversation of what people say about me when I'm not there, I've got to cultivate an atmosphere where I can control as much of that conversation as possible, right? And so I feel like they're related in that way. And you and I talked about this a little bit before we started. Video, and Barry mentioned this, video is sort of a thing right now and really seems to be really effective at getting people managing that conversation of what people say about you. What are you doing with video? What would you advise people to do? Is that a good place to start, or would you start with some other kind of content piece?
Well, I think that everything that you're mentioning now comes down to building trust and building a connection, because you're right, it is kind of intangible why someone's going to choose me as a lawyer over somebody else, or vice versa. Some people will shop exclusively on price, and I don't want to win those people, and I'm not going to win those people. I want to win people who shop based on value and experience and trust and service and a connection. And that's what I try to convey in the content and in video. I've been doing video for probably almost 10 years now. You can tell they're still on YouTube. They're poorly produced in a basement conference room of our old office, dimly lit. Now I'm doing better quality, better content, shorter videos. My first videos I would ramble on and on and on one topic. Video is great for building that trust, hearing your voice, seeing your face, knowing you're a real person, showing your age, all of these things. They're subtle. They're not, people don't even tangibly notice that that's what it's doing, but that's what it's doing. They're not only getting the great content from you, but it's building that trust. I now have on every landing page on my website, if not every, virtually every, there's a brief video introducing the page if somebody wants to watch it.
Yeah, I'm curious, you guys who are watching, make sure comment below and let me know, what are you guys doing with video? This is a thing that I've sort of started with. The other day, somebody messaged me and said, "Hey, I'm your first subscriber on YouTube." He's like, "I'm your #1 fan," or what? Because he was literally the subscriber on my YouTube channel, which has existed for 8 years or something, that YouTube channel, and I literally just put my first video up on it like 3 weeks ago. And so I'm just getting started with it. For you guys who have been doing this, any tips or ideas on how to do it better? I've sort of got this workflow where I'm doing these sessions, and then it sends over to YouTube, and we were talking, Eric and I, about splitting them off and doing podcasts. That's one of the things I like about video, is that it's like the highest level that you can repurpose down. It's really hard, having done it, to go from text, like I wrote a blog post, up, right? That's harder to go up to. You can read your posts. I did that on a podcast for a while at Case Text. So that's a repurposing up, but video is a nice way to sort of trickle it down. Yeah, I wanted to ask about just like your process when, just to get practical with it. Are you just straight, are you recording in like Camtasia or something and then doing basic edits and moving it over, or is somebody editing stuff for you? How are you getting that stuff out?
So this actually, there's a pre-coronavirus and post-coronavirus version of it. For the last few years, I flew to a studio in Cleveland for the day, and I would knock out 20-ish videos in one day. And then they would edit, add graphics and music, add some images if appropriate, and then I would push them out on YouTube and wherever else. While
you're talking, by the way, even though it may explode my computer, I'm going to go over to a browser here and pull up your YouTube. Is it under?
Okay, here's an amazing tip.
Yeah.
Free advice. Register your name, your brand, your law firm, .tv. Set it up to forward automatically to your YouTube channel. So all you got to do is go to ericpelton.tv and you're on my YouTube channel.
Hey, I'm going to show. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to see if I can screen share and get it to go over to Chrome, and we're going to try this live, people. All right. So, by the way, whatever recommendations you're seeing for videos right now is not because I watch this stuff. It's because my son was using my iPad, and so there's all like gamer things and stuff, and it's ridiculous. Oh, why did I type that? Erik Pelton.
Eric with a K, Pelton.tv.
.tv. All right. Why does it keep? Oh, because you've got a forward set up. That's why it's going over to YouTube. I was like, did I just search in the wrong place? All right, so we've got a bunch of video. So I'm seeing a white background. Is that pre or post?
That's post. So that's a very recent video.
Are the ones in Cleveland the ones that you're sitting with somebody in an office with books in the background?
No, those are the very, very old ones.
Oh, okay.
The Cleveland ones are where I'm wearing a nice shirt and there's a backdrop.
Oh, yeah, I got them. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, it's got that black background.
But yeah, and you can tell they're shot with an actual camera in real high quality.
Yeah, but these newer ones still look good.
Yeah, they're good enough.
And you're doing those at home?
So I'm now, I Skype with my video and content team in Cleveland. They record the call.
Oh, gotcha.
And then push it out. But it's no different than doing it myself because there's nothing extra added.
Boy, you've got like all these professorial videos, like you in a dark room with a pink sweater on.
So the other valuable thing, I love talking about content, and it is closely related to branding. The second thing I want to go back because they said there was two intersections. The second intersection is that branding. A lot of branding is showing your expertise, and that's what's so great about content is don't be afraid to show you're an expert, to give away content and tips. There's plenty more that people need to hire you for. Again, I think this applies in every legal field or almost every legal field.
9 years ago. Your first video was 9 years ago. Holy cow. Sorry. Man. Go on. Be better than me. Keep talking. Sorry.
So in coming up with the videos, though, I'm trying to provide great content and useful information, but I'm also trying to think about how people search for information. So I'm trying to think about, biggest trademark application mistakes or how to protect my brand. I think about the phrases that people search when they're looking for information, and I try to get my content to match some of my content to match that. And I look at my blog posts because I have hundreds of blog posts and see which ones have performed the best. Those are subjects that people are obviously the most interested in. So I'll make more videos about that content.
I'm looking through just to see what has more views than other things in your different formats. And some of these, like I'm looking common trademark application mistakes from 9 years ago, which is not a pretty video, it doesn't look like, is 73,000 views.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. That one, for whatever reason, it has the right combination of keywords. It must come up when other people watch, when they watch other trademark videos. Yeah. I think that one comes up as then the next best recommendation for the second video.
That's interesting because a bunch of these, that are even higher produced, like there's one, what to ask when hiring an online trademark service, and it's only got 75 views, right? Some of these high produced ones have 30 views, 17 views. And that one, I mean, there's a lesson in there about just make the stuff, right? Like you don't know what's going to take off.
You know what? 70,000 views or however many is great, but 75 views is great too if there's 3 clients among those 75. Yeah. It doesn't matter if 100,000 people watch it and none of them call me, right? It's all about finding the right client.
I've shared this story before. Do you know the Texas Law Hawk, Brian?
No.
Do you know who oh my gosh. If you guys have not seen the Texas Law Hawk video, stop what you're doing and go watch Brian. He's crazy. He was doing all these sort of frat boy, stunts. Like he's doing literal, like they're jumping water skis off of ramps and in a Santa costume, and he's just yelling at the TV. And these were his lawyer ads. You hear the screeching sound of a hawk, and he's like screaming at it's hilarious. And it was funny because Brian, it looked like it was on purpose, right? As opposed to those ads that are doing this for just noise, right? And they think that this is like a serious ad as they yell at the TV. Brian, it was parody. I mean, he loves making these videos. He wanted to be a stuntman, and so. Anyway, Brian A is exactly the person that you see in those videos. Like frat boy, crazy, Aggie, he's nuts. Sweet kid, but man, he's crazy. And I was at a Clio conference a few years ago, and he did a session about these viral videos, about these videos that he got so big that he got on a Taco Bell commercial during the Super Bowl. Wow. And so he's got this crazy brand. So he's telling the story of all these videos, and at the end of it, which I'm talking millions of views, right? Like he got huge. And somebody asked at the end of it, have you gotten any clients from this? And he goes, no.
Not really.
Yeah. They were like, but he said, but I get a lot of calls. And they said, I don't understand. If all these calls are not for clients, what are you getting calls for? And he said, people who want me to record the voicemail for their buddy. Right?
Oh my God.
They just wanted him yelling the Texas Law Hawk and the scream sound. I've talked to him a bit since then, and he did point out that like now he's getting a very trickle down effect of just his name being out there and people knowing him as a lawyer, and he does criminal stuff, and he's targeting a segment with this frat boy thing, and it works really well for him now. But his first however many million views were not leading to any clients. So back to your point about you can have fewer views and still win. You can have fewer views and still win.
Right.
You don't need to be the law hawk.
Right.
Barry, I didn't know. This is funny. Barry just added, Mike, I was the one who asked him the question at Clio. That's funny. Barry, right? Yeah. He totally was like, yeah, I've hardly gotten any. I think he said like 1 to 2% are actual prospective clients. And Shelley made the point that Brian had a clear brand. No one else could pull that off well. And that's certainly like, you can't go duplicate that right now. You can't be Brian. Now, but anyway, I back to your point of if your aim in this stuff is to get clients, you should go get clients. Do something that goes and gets clients. And Eric, I'm going to nerd here for a second. Eric, have you read the book, the Lawyer Forward book? I don't know if you've read it yet, so I'm going to totally repeat myself to people who have read this, but I think that there's two different kinds of businesses here. One is the audience building. I'm serving them however they want to be served. That's Brian, right? Like he goes and he gets a huge crowd, and his job is to, as they come and they say, I want, he can look and say, should I deliver on this service or not? So like, frankly, if I'm Brian, I'm charging $5 and I'm doing voicemail recordings or whatever, because you just serve your audience. If you don't want to, whatever. The other kind of person who's trying to be the known expert, right? The visible expert, to use a term from a company called Hinge Marketing. These videos have a different purpose, right? These videos are demonstrating expertise and forcing you, using David Baker's getting to know process, forcing you to sit down and come up with an informed opinion, right? Like it forces you think you know things, but until you create content about those things, you don't really think through what you know, right? Like, so these seem to have the purpose of just making you the expert you think you are.
Yeah, and then I'll add to that, when you're creating video or really any type of content, and this is what the studio, the web design team that I told you about, his name's Chad Barr. He's a friend of mine, a client, and he's the one who's taught me about this over the years, is using stories, using real examples. Number one, they make the content come to life. Number two, they kind of double down on the expertise. Right. It's one thing to say, in a trademark application, you should do this and this. It's another thing to say, well, I was doing this and this and this for a client last week, and here's what it really just doubles down and shows the expertise a lot more.
Yeah, and I think maybe the lesson out of this is, I wrote in the book about your competitive basis. There were 4, I think, from this book that I quoted. It was cost and quality and innovation and something else that I can't remember. So figure out what your competitive basis is, and that's really going to direct a lot of what you'll talk about in these things. If you're that quality person, you're trying to build on expertise, you're going to have a totally different, kind of video than you would if your job is just to go connect and be big and loud. Nina asked a good question that I had a thought on, but I want to get your take first.
Sure.
She said, Eric, have you ever done an ROI calculation on your videos and other social media platforms? So like, how are you... If everything's a trade-off, right? Everything's got opportunity costs. If you're spending an hour doing X, you're not doing Y. How are you thinking through the value of these kinds of activities? Are you measuring them? Are you adjusting what you're creating based on things like views? Like, what's your metric?
That is a painful question because I am horrible at that. And I freely admit it, as I do now. Right. There's 2 things I can tell you. I've gone on instinct and gut my whole life, which is not a data-based answer, I know. And I enjoy it. So first is I enjoy it. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do nearly as much of it. Right. The quote unquote data that I have that I know that it works is people tell me all the time, I watched your video. That's why I called you on this. Right. I saw your blog post. When I started doing podcasts, I was skeptical that anybody would want to sit in their car and listen to a trademark lawyer talk to them about trademarks. Now, they're probably not listening in their car, and they're searching for content about trademark information, and the podcast comes up and people listen, and people actually call and tell me they were listening to the podcast. And I've seen the statistics. There are presumably real listeners that are not bots in Russia, and again, it doesn't take, I don't need 1,000 listeners. I only need 10 good listeners, and it's worth the time.
Well, and I think, let's compare you to the Texas Law Hawk, and let's just say, for simplicity's sake, that's the difference between an expert business, Erik, and an audience business, Brian. Brian's analysis of these things and his purpose for these things is different in the sense that he's going to say, oh, my holiday videos are doing really well, I'm going to do more holiday videos. For Erik, he's, again, developing expertise out loud and demonstrating expertise. And so it's almost as if, I'm not saying create stuff that there's 0 views, but the ROI is a little harder to put your finger on if the purpose is for you to create genuine expertise through your content creation. If you're doing David Baker's exercise of getting to know, he calls it KNOW, of working through content pieces as a way to force you to craft insights, well, those insights have value downstream that's really hard to tie to it. The other thing, getting back to that podcast I mentioned earlier, the Hustle and Flowchart one, if what you're doing is cultivating an atmosphere, and this guy makes this point in the podcast, it's almost impossible to calculate ROI. Right? Like, even if you've got an audience-focused business, it's really hard to say this led to this many clients. Because when you're cultivating an atmosphere, you don't know if it was the first interaction or the 7th interaction that caused them to actually call. And so even though the data is really messed up, because this is called attribution in the marketing world. Attribution used to be so much easier when you could track everything on Google. Now attribution is really hard because they might have clicked on that cat video that you posted, but it wasn't the cat video that got them to think of you. It was the cat video. I'll give the example. When I was at Casetext, we did two things. This person who ended up signing up for Casetext, she said 2 things got her. Me posting on Twitter. I had posted on Twitter, here's this new feature of Casetext. And then she got an email that said, you should try a free trial. And what she said, and this is totally made up, she said, my tweet got her 98% there, and the email got her over the other 2%. So what was the ROI value? In terms of attribution, my tweet will never show up. Casetext will never know that my tweet directed anything unless she said it. But she gave the number of 98% for that tweet. So anyway, attribution gets really tough with this kind of exercise.
Well, and along the same lines, the Google and search engine performance is so valuable for my brand because I have clients all over the country and they find me online, presumably. And I can't point to any one thing that's increased my search performance, right? It's the conglomeration of all of those things. And I firmly believe, and if I stop doing any of them, the search performance is likely to shrink. So I keep going with the videos, keep going with the podcast. Now I've written a book and promote that on Amazon, and all of those things are to keep and raise the search profile because that's so important.
I only recently, Nina and Jessica both have follow-up questions I wanted to get to, but just as an aside, there is an artist named Michael Whalen. He is a fantasy artist. I am never going to own the front page of Michael Whalen if you do a search. But very recently, my kids pointed out to me that I own the entirety of the first page of Mike Whalen. And what's interesting about it is if you do the search for Mike Whalen, there's book stuff, there's blog posts, there's my Twitter account, there's blog posts by other people about stuff that I'm doing, there's my website, there's conference stuff, there's the YouTube page. Like for winning at Google, and this is especially true for lawyers if you're trying to get into the Google My Business, which we talked about with Mike Ramsey earlier, you've got to own the entire front page, and that requires doing a lot of stuff that you don't know what that ROI is. So real quick, Nina asked, what do you mean by cultivate an atmosphere? So just FYI, Nina, we had talked about that a little bit earlier, which is sort of doing all this nebulous, hard to track work. But I'll go find the podcast that inspired that comment, and I'll add it to the comments below. Jessica said that she thinks her question was probably answered, but she said, I created a family law FAQ on her page. Do you think it's more effective in video? Would you recommend moving to video for content? So in terms of like FAQs, and you might have a different opinion on this, I feel like FAQs have a certain search intent, right? Like if somebody's on your website and they click the FAQ button, right, they might have a different purpose than somebody who goes and searches you. I don't, and you tell me if this is crazy, I don't think FAQs are getting on the first page of Google anymore, right? Those little 300-word blog posts for that long list of questions, even for long-tail searches, you're competing with Avvo and with FindLaw and with these national directories. I don't know if I would say FAQs are for that purpose. That doesn't mean FAQs aren't useful, but I don't know if it's for that purpose. What do you think, Erik?
Yeah, I've never been huge on the FAQs, but going back to where I think towards the beginning we were saying, the best is to repurpose all the content in all these different formats. So if you have a page with text content on it, there's no reason not to also do a video on it, and then take the video and do it as a podcast. And then I take the video and do it as a transcript. So it's like a secondary blog post with slightly different wording and a slightly different title. And again, it all comes down to what phrases people are searching for.
Right. I think maybe the lesson here is, and I've been saying this for a while, you're not going to win search with a 300-word blog post about a random question. It's just not going to happen. Those big brands are even doing long-tail search terms. They're doing like, hey, what do I do on a Thursday if my kid isn't returned with the blanket that they were supposed to have because it was in the order that dad was... Like, you can do these really long-tail... Nobody's asking this question. You could spend an infinite amount of time trying to capture those questions. FindLaw is still going to beat you. Those directories have such good search juice, right? That if they answer anything remotely like the question being asked, they're still going to show up at the top. So what I might recommend is do the videos as the top end piece of content. And like Erik said, then go take it, strip out the audio, get rev.com or one of these services to transcribe it, and then turn that into your FAQ, right? Like, put it in the same place. But I do think if you look at what Google is doing, they definitely prioritize video. Like if you do a search right now, there's a stacking, right? The Google results are stacked, and at the top of the stack is video. Here's some huge news that you guys might not know that came out like 6 months ago. Under that, they are actually indexing podcasts. They have now figured out how to transcribe podcasts to the point that they'll go index podcasts. So right under video is podcasts now, and then organic results. And if there's relevant news is above that. So go look at the way Google is prioritizing search, and I would probably follow their prioritization. Yeah?
Yeah, I think that's great wisdom. And YouTube is the number 2 search engine in the world. Right. People, my kids would say, yeah, of course, right? Yeah. But, that's not intuitive. When I first heard that, I was like, are you serious? I would never have guessed. And then, of course, since it's Google, it's all intertwined.
Yeah. Nina asked the question, could you also identify the Baker book that I had referenced before? So it's David C. Baker's book. It's called The Business of Expertise. I quoted a ton in my book because I really do think these are different activities. So I wanted to talk, Erik, quickly about billboards. We had a conversation about this a bit in our session, and I think it's a really interesting question of maybe it's different right now than what you would normally think. Maybe it's different if you live in a small town versus a large town. Maybe it's different if you've got Dunn and Associates versus Central Texas Family Law. Whatever. In Texas, you can't do trade names, so I might give a different answer for whether you're allowed to do trade names or not. Do you think these kinds of billboards are the classic straight branding activity? There's no I don't care if you put a phone number on there. Nobody's clicking a button on your billboard. There's not a traceable. It's really hard to attribute. Any idea that you're going to buy a billboard and be able to trace the ROI is insane, right? Would you go get a billboard?
No, I would not. I mean, also because they're expensive, and you could do a million other things with that money. I've always been puzzled. I mean, where I live in the Washington, D.C. area, there's not a heavy amount of billboards. When I go to Florida, because we go to Florida frequently on vacation, there's billboards and lawyer billboards everywhere. And you're right. Nobody's like, that's it. I needed a lawyer and I forgot about it. And there's the phone number. I'm calling them right now and pulling over. Right. But so the idea of the billboard you got to get through to somebody 10 times before they actually remember who you are and are going to call you when they need you. Right. That is value. And that's exactly what we've been talking about with creating all of this content that's out there and creating a brand that's unique, that separates you to some extent from all your competitors in your area of law out there, and then getting known in that field. And then people can easily remember. They might not remember my name, but if they saw my website, if they saw my face, or if they saw my sunflower branding, yeah, that's the guy I was talking about.
Yeah, I think for like a lot of PI firms are not, the owner is not the expert. The owner is the audience builder. So these are entrepreneurial firms, right? A lot of these PI firms. I saw one article that said basically, if you're willing to pay $1,000 per customer, per client, then yeah, get a billboard. Well, if I'm a PI lawyer, that starts to make a lot of sense because I'm an audience builder. I'm just trying to get my name out there. I'm not building through referrals so much, though a lot of PI firms do that as well. But as Maddie Martin said at a live conference years ago for Lawyer Forward, referrals are not a growth strategy, right? You can only go so far with referrals. It starts to cap out. And if you're a scaling business, if you're this entrepreneurial kind of business, you're starting to look at different solutions. Quick side note, as something super weird. If you've never been to San Francisco, go sometime in San Francisco and pay attention to the billboards. It's the weirdest thing because you'll drive into the city and there are billboards from these huge VC-funded, got way too much money companies that nobody's ever heard of. There's some random super niche technical company. They're not for average Joes, right? But these companies and San Francisco billboards, in Rockport, our billboard was $700 a month, those kinds of billboards. These are $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a month billboards. And they're just putting up, Slack is cool, you should use it. Like, that's it. Super brandy. And what somebody told me was, it was Jack at Clio, told me that those are mostly to get employees. That's what those things are for. They're not to get customers, they're to get employees to come sign up. So maybe the big picture lesson in this billboard thing is a big old it depends. Not that you should all go get billboards. This is not low-hanging fruit for lawyers. But Chris White made the point the other day, in a small town, a billboard is a great ROI. It makes sense for him because he is a general practitioner. He takes all kinds. He doesn't have to brand deep. All he has to do is say, I'm a lawyer, and people will show up. So big fat it depends. Yeah,
a big fat it depends. And it's also, right, there's some value in showing that you're successful enough that you can afford the billboard.
Right.
People want the lawyer who's really successful.
Yeah. There better be a hammer on it. You better refer to yourself as the hammer. There's got to be an anvil of some kind that you're hitting the hammer onto the anvil and then explosions are happening behind you. These are the rules with marketing, people. I don't make them up. I wanted to ask you to get a little dorky and ask you about Shake and Bake. Do you remember the Shake and Bake commercial? It's Shake and Bake, and I helped. Do you remember that commercial? No.
I remember Shake and Bake, but I do not remember
Maybe this is
that
a Southernism. So there was this, Shake and Bake is this company that it's breadcrumbs. It's like seasoned breadcrumbs. And you drop your chicken in there and you shake it in a bag and then you put it in the oven. This is ridiculous as a product, right? It's a Ziploc bag with breadcrumbs. That's what Shake and Bake is. But they did these commercials that got so big. The whole brand was driven by these commercials where there was a little girl who comes in and she says, "It's shake and bake and I helped," right? It's this absurd, go look for the commercial. I'm not making this up, okay? But I think the lesson from that, and I wanted to get you to talk about this, is when you're doing branding, shake and bake was driven by an emotion, right? They're trying to figure out an emotional value, and having a little girl say, "This is so simple," right? Like this is a child. The message that they're sending is, "This is so simple." And, so if you're the parent who wants a simple dinner, this is so simple, and it brings your family together because now you're right. And some of these brands are so good at this. Johnson and Johnson famously is great at this, like capturing the emotional value. When you're talking to lawyers about building a brand, how does the emotion of the client, come into those branding exercises?
Yeah, I like your examples, even though I've not seen the shake and bake. But those subtle things are important in conveying a message, right? Like my message, I have sunflowers on all of my branding stuff. That's a little bit softer, a little bit more artistic, right? It's not a hammer. It's not a bookshelf full of impressive volumes that I wrote or study, allegedly. So there are a million things that we do that either consciously or unconsciously are creating that emotion, or that what is the message that we're trying to convey. The colors that are chosen, the logo that's chosen, are they bold and hard, or are they, soft and, childish? Right. There's a million different angles, and they all have a value. And I think the most important thing is that they reflect who the firm is and their values, and that they're chosen for a reason. And then when it really comes to branding, then you incorporate it into everything that you're doing. And so the subtle thing of me sitting here for the last hour drinking my sunflower cup, when I wear a blazer, I put a sunflower pin on it. Those subtle things are just reinforcing unconsciously, subconsciously, not unconsciously, the brand message.
We're never going to wear suit jackets again. I do want to point out, Shelley Woodard said, "I pretend my dog says it's shake and bake and I helped. Every time I'm cooking and he is between me and what I'm trying to do, I remember it," she says. So you're not alone. Maybe it's a certain Kansas, Midwestern,
I grew up in Boston,
Southern.
So for me, it's if you said it's time to make the donuts with the fake mustache guy, I would know exactly what you're saying. And you have no idea
reference.
What I'm talking about.
No reference.
Those were famous Dunkin' Donuts commercials in New England in the 80s.
Yeah, we've all got those weird things. So I want to get practical. I was actually about to say, what's a good book for lawyers to start with figuring out branding? And of course, I'm saying that to a guy who wrote a book about dealing with your branding issues. So I wanted to get a little bit practical. Yeah, right. It's got a sunflower, people. So I wanted to get a little bit practical because I do. When I wrote my first book, which is How to Start a Firm in 14 Days or whatever, and the way that book was structured was every day there was a little thing to do. And one of them, like I found, and Jessica and I talked about this as well, I found that with that book, people like to have a step. Like a thing, go get a win, move on, right? Get that dopamine rush of making some wins. So let's get a little practical. If I'm a lawyer and I want to do something like pick colors, place you would start. Where would you get going on, I need to pick 3 colors for my website or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, there are a gazillion resources online for all of these things that are for general logo building, branding, for any type of business. But I think before you even get to that, you want to go with the core values, with, again, the message that your firm is trying to convey. So I think you want to look at your core values and who your target client is. And then you brainstorm a bunch of keywords. What are the things we're trying to convey? Is it strength or compassion or knowledge or experience or youthfulness or hawks, right?
Right.
Like, what is the thing you're trying to convey? And then figure out, okay, how do we build a brand around this? It doesn't take a fancy, expensive brand advisor, I don't think.
Yeah. And there are like swatch. You can just go Google search, and I might try to find one for you and put it in the comments below. But you can go do a Google search for just swatch samples, like colors that go together, right? So that you're doing 3 colors that makes sense. What about a logo? If you were getting started with a logo, where would you go? What tool would you use for that?
I mean, I've used 99 Designs. I believe that's what it's called. And a great idea, great service. There's other ones out there where you put out your basic description of what you're looking for. They give you a variety of contestants submit ideas, and you winnow it down and have a little back and forth with them, and you get some final options. There's a lot of alternatives out there as well.
I was looking for my book because I was going to make a point about that logo on the bottom right that you guys see on the screen is a 99 design. And then my book cover is a totally different set of colors with a totally different visual. So I screwed it up. Okay. Don't do like I do.
Make it cohesive. Pick one brand and go and
should have gone with flowers. I'm like, I had a copy of the book on this desk, and now I'm freaking out.
You went with forward, and there's no arrow. Is there an arrow?
There's an arrow in the full text one, but not in this little thing. This looks like a little, yeah. I'm sorry, but I like the colors. I think it's ironic that the F is backwards while talking about forward. I think that's funny. But anyway, yeah, don't do like I did. But that is a 99 design, and they gave me actually 2 designs. There's this, which is the little small design, and then there's one with words that's got like arrows and swishes in it. And what is the right way to say it doesn't matter while still saying it matters, right?
Yeah. Nobody's going to hire you because of your logo, but they're going to hire you because of your overall brand and characteristics and trust and persona. And the logo is one element that helps convey that. Or if it's good, it helps convey that quickly and effectively. So if I was trying to say that I'm soft and I have great service and we really take care of our clients and I'm artistic, and then my logo was a hammer striking an anvil, that would be like a total disconnect. Yeah. So it just should all be cohesive.
You can do a hawk, like a little thing. That wouldn't make any sense. Yeah, and so website, same kind of question. You see a lot of these, FindLaw. Don't do FindLaw. They're not a sponsor, so I can say that. You see a lot of these websites that are like, we'll build you a custom website. What are your 3 colors? And then of course they go do the same website they've done for 100 different people.
A custom website.
Yeah, but with your 3 colors, like what if you're doing a website? If you're talking to people about your web address, which for a lot of people is your curb appeal, right? This is your front door. It's not your company's front door. This is your front door. What would you tell people in terms of resources, where to start with that? Is a custom website with 3 colors enough? How would you go about that in terms of branding?
I think it's worth working with someone who actually builds websites from the ground up to, this is the experience that I had. Because I've been around for too long, I built my first website at HTML, coded it myself. It looked like it. At the time, there was some value in that because it was like, hey, I'm practical. I'm kind of techie. I can do this. Right. And everybody's website looked horrible back then. Then I had like a stock WordPress website with, my logo superimposed on the banner and my picture, and it looked okay, but I had that for way too long. Then, again, through my friend Chad, he introduced me. He said, okay, what you need is you don't need a website. What you need is a presence, and what are you trying to convey? The website is one tool for doing that, but the website is not really a thing on its own.
Because that's great. You don't need a website. You need a presence. That's a great sentence.
He calls it a digital empire. And so we broke it down. Okay, first, again, who is your target client? What is the message you're trying to convey? Then we'll structure a site around it. Should be mostly pictures, mostly text, mostly video? I'm sure there's different answers, but you want it, the presence.
Yeah, I like that. It's that cultivating an atmosphere thing again, right? Like you're trying to create a world in which your outcome is more likely in a complex system. It's fascinating to me because I nerd out about this stuff. So unfortunately, I know you wanted to make fun of me for not protecting my trademark of the Lawyer Forward brand. But unfortunately, I got you talking long enough that there's just no time for you to make fun of it. So protect your trademarks. Is that a lesson?
That is. So once you have a brand, and now I think you've doubled down on the Lawyer Forward brand, right? Yeah. Now you have a podcast coming too.
Right.
So when you have a brand, I imagine you would be kind of upset if somebody else, knocked it off, right? And so there's a value in protecting it because it will make it a lot easier to defend and guard it if somebody does try to knock it off. Also, it makes it into a tangible asset. So you could license it or transfer it someday in the future or sell it or do other things with it. And it shows that you value it just by using the R with a circle when you get a registration. I think it conveys something to your customers, regardless of what business you're in, your clients, your readers, your customers. Hey, this is something we made, we built, we came up with. We're proud of it. We spent a little bit of money to protect it. It's important to us.
So if other people are better than me and they want to do this exercise that you spoke of, what's the best way to contact you, Erik?
At erikpelton.com. It's erikpelton.com. Or they can email me, erik@erikpelton.com. Or they can learn about the book at buildingaboldbrand.com. You can see domain names. I think you have a lot of domain names too. They're easy. They're great. Like the .tv.
Nothing is as satisfying as one of these registrants sending me the email that says, so-and-so is about to expire. Because I've been paying for so many websites I will never use that will never exist. So yeah. I don't mind them going away. I have had people reach out and pay me for a couple of websites, which is fascinating. I had like MRW Law or something, like those are my initials, Michael Robert Wade. And so somebody paid me like $5,000 or something to get access to that page. I was like, really? Because they wanted this very specific. Anyway, so
that paid for your habit for a while.
Yeah, I have totally paid way more than $5,000 probably for domain names. Don't be like me. Thank you, Erik. Thank you all. Now remember, you can continue to post comments below, questions, talk about this stuff below. You can come back to this anytime. Don't forget also tonight, Nick and I, I've been doing these Facebook Lives every night at 9 p.m. Nick Richwain and I are going to do Ask Twinsies tonight. It's funny because we look like each other.
Now,
I'm the pretty one.
Nick's also balding and has a beard. Does he have glasses as well?
Yeah, I'm not balding. I've long since arrived. Yes,
I sense a theme. Yeah,
we look very similar, and we also both give terrible advice. So if you want some terrible advice, go on any social media platform, hashtag Ask Twinsies. I will, as a preface, tell you that Paul, one of our friends, asked us what our favorite chili ingredient is. When I answer this, it will shock and disgust you. So make sure you show up tonight, 9 p.m. Central, Ask Twinsies, and ask for some terrible life advice. Erik, thank you again for joining us. We'll see you guys on the next one. Look over to the left, which is that way, apparently, and hit the events button. Look at all the other upcoming sessions. Click going to the ones you're interested in. It will send you notifications, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.
Thanks.